couple of months ago, I previewed Crossed Paths' upcoming dragon bonding game, Draconim, and today we're journeying back into the world of Azeroth to take a look at another game in that setting, Brambletrek. The default setting for Draconim is Batessian, a war-torn region in the north of the western continent, but Brambletrek takes place here in the verdant forests of High Hill in the east. And instead of bonding with dragons, we'll be exploring this forest realm as mousefolk Norborn from the village of Brambletrek. Brambletrek is much more specifically a GM-less and solo game, and something I'd like to show in this review is how games like Brambletrek are a great choice if you're thinking of trying out solo gaming. To be clear, I'm not saying Brambletrek is a perfect match for every playstyle or anything like that, but if you're used to more traditional games and are curious about solo RPGs, games like Brambletrek will have some familiar tropes and norms, and can teach you some of the more common features of solo games, like card drawing, prompts, and journaling. Once again, it's cards on the table time. It's been 2 years since the original Brambletrek crowdfunder. The public hardback release I think is coming up, and the lovely folks at Crosspaths sent me a fair few things as part of that celebration. I don't know for sure if all of this will be available to buy, but the Crosspaths team have once again cleverly exploited my need to declare everything I receive and hence show it off. I've got some fun accessories here, like a little cuddly Norborn, Bramble, I think, the seer, a fabric map of Azeroth, and some very cute and vibrant Norborn pins. In the more game-adjacent category, we have a card deck and a journal. The journal is supple and nicely bound, A4 with 3 character sheets, and each spread has a mechanics section for tracking combat and card draws, and then a journal entry section. I love the Brambletrek cards. They're simple and elegant and very usable in any game. And the face cards are all more Norborn. And on the front cover of the core book, we have another Norborn, wistfully looking at the stars, which I think really nicely sets the tone. The book itself is an A4 hardback with very high print and paper quality. It's well laid out, easy to read, and filled with illustrations of even more Norborn. Inside, the base game only takes up the first third of the book, with the rest dedicated to the first 2 expansions, Secrets of the World Tree and Dungeons of Dragonkeep. At the core of Brambletrek is a very simple version of a ubiquitous mechanic in journaling games, drawing a card from a deck and looking up a prompt. But Brambletrek has a more tactical twist than most journaling games, so for every adventuring day you draw 4 cards. Each one gives you a little event that happened during the day, with a little snippet of flavour text and a mechanical instruction to go along with it, like gaining or losing resources, that kind of thing. Hearts and diamonds are generally positive encounters, and clubs and spades are more negative, although drawing any face card means a combat encounter. You can resolve these daily events in any order you like using abilities from your class to help you do things like negate negative effects or gain an edge in combat. Combat is similar enough to the exploration mechanic to be simple to pick up, with a little bit more depth. To resolve a combat encounter, you do a quick and simple draw for initiative. Whoever gets the highest card goes first. Then you draw a hand of 4 cards and look up the abilities you have available from a list, just like you did with your prompts. Only this time, each class has its own list of actions. On each of your turns, you play a card from your hand in any order you like, activating that ability. And on the opponent's turns, you reveal a card and look up the action they take on an enemy combat table. When you run out of cards, draw a new hand and repeat. It has quite a board gamey and tactical feel to it, like a far simpler Gloomhaven, if you're familiar with that, creating moments when you feel clever for playing just the right card at the right time, and moments when you're anxiously waiting to draw a new hand. Those mechanics might sound a little abstract at first, and surprisingly gamey for something you might reasonably have thought of as a journaling experience. So let's put them into practice. First, we'll roll our Norborn, or draw, I guess. We draw a reason for leaving the village on an adventure. I drew that there's a mysterious obelisk with indecipherable carvings just outside of town. My character has been dreaming about it. Then we draw a background, and I got child of a humble baker. And next is an item, and I got hunting knife with magical engravings gifted to my character by a mentor. And putting these prompts together, I imagined a meek young mouse who bakes magical tarts and admires an older adventurer who's investigating the strange obelisk in the woods. Last time the adventurer was in town, they left my character a knife they'd acquired that has those same carvings on it, a big lead. The adventurer then set out to seek the origin of the knife, but this time they haven't returned. And it's time for my young Norborn to pack a bag and pick up the trail. I'm hoping this shows how these prompts can become more than the sum of their parts when you let them. A lot of solo role-playing is about connecting seemingly unconnected things like this, and so you could view this very simple way of creating a background and motivation for your character as a kind of tutorial for the rest of the game. On to more mechanical choices, and we draw and assign our starting resource levels: health, morale, and supply. Don't fret about these too much, they'll go up and down a lot in play. And then we pick a legacy, which is like a class with some special abilities listed on the class page, and later the tables of combat moves that I mentioned before. There's the seer, the scrapper, the storyteller, the seeker, the sneaker, and the soother. So very familiar class roles if you're used to traditional RPGs. And you then set out on your journey, which will take you across the overland of High Hill and into the caverns of Aldwund. You'll find treasures, meet friends, face threats, and if you feel like you've made enough progress along your quest, you can check the ending table and decide whether your story comes to a close or is only just beginning. There's a fair few ways to expand your Brambletrek experience. Firstly, I always like to point them out when I see rules for group play in these kinds of games. So, here they are. This hardback version also comes with Brambletrek's first two expansions, Secrets of the World Tree and Dungeons of Dragon Keep. Secrets of the World Tree is an expansion in a proper sense. It increases your resource cap, adds new items, and 4 new flavours of adversary, each with 13 levels of difficulty. And most importantly, it introduces a whole new area to explore, the Heimstree, the ancient primordial world tree, a source of magic and life on Akaroth. Dungeons of Dragon Keep is a guided adventure that offers a short traditional dungeon crawl with themed areas and enemies, capped by an epic multi-phase boss fight. I actually tried this out first to see if it works as an introductory adventure. It does, although at a couple of points it veers away from the usual mechanics of the base game, and it starts with 2 days of regular travel anyway. Perhaps if you skip those 2 days of regular travel, it might hold your hand a little bit more. There's also 2 more short expansions available in digital form on itch, though I don't know much about them. And of course there's the upcoming Brambletrek 2, a Winnie the Pooh themed story where instead of High Hill, you'll be exploring the 100 Acre Woods. A couple of things dampened the fun I had when playing the game. They're mostly subjective, but I think worth mentioning. First, when I previewed Draconim, I really enjoyed the lore of Akaroth, even though I was a little critical of how disjointed it felt. So I was excited to see what Brambletrek had to offer in that area, since it's a more polished, finished product. For the most part though, you'll be making your own version of High Hill in Brambletrek, and the small amounts of concrete substance in the book seem to contradict the lore in Draconim. So Akaroth still seems like a disjointed place to me, and High Hill doesn't feel as unique as it could. Second, I picked the Soother for my Baker character. I like the sound of it on the Legacy page, but later in combat, the abilities didn't leave a lot of room for creativity and were so focused on healing that I didn't feel much sense of danger, more that I was patiently waiting for the encounter to end. So I recommend having a look beyond the Legacy pages at all the class abilities to make sure you're happy with that playstyle before committing. And one last little nitpick. In my copy, there are a few minor editing problems to be aware of, like the guided adventure telling you to turn to the wrong page quite a few times. It's not a big deal, though. At this point, there's something I want to get out of the way, and that's the comparison that I think a lot of people will make with another game. I try really hard in my reviews to let games stand on their own merit and be their own thing, to not judge them based on their relationships to other games, and certainly not to say one is better than another. That might sound simple, but art exists within genres and is always inspired by what came before. Games use common rule elements and SRDs, and so some comparisons are helpful. And the obvious comparison in this case is with Colossal. They're both about a journey of discovery. They both use a similar system of character creation, of drawing cards and building the day's adventure. The format and layout are similar, and the rules might feel familiar too. If you're used to one, you'll find the other easy to pick up. So where do they differ? Well, besides the obvious skins, mousy forest adventure versus giant fractal castle adventure, the engines inside give a different feel as well. Colossal is a bit more narratively focused and less concerned with things like resource management. Its prompts are thematic and evocative but more vague. Brambletrek, despite being more open-ended in its premise, is far more specific in its prompts, telling you what happens and what the outcome will be in terms of resources gained or lost if you don't challenge the event. And combat is much more tactical and less abstract, with specific abilities tied to your class. In the end though, if you're a fan of one, chances are you'll be a fan of the other. On its own, Brambletrek is an easy to learn, easy to play journaling game with a fun tactical twist. If you're a bit apprehensive about creative writing, it doesn't really ask anything of you. You don't have to write anything, just track your resources. But As you play more, you can allow the simple prompts to inspire you. You'll learn to combine the seemingly unconnected, create a story that isn't in the text of the book and didn't exist in your head until you discovered it. Your own version of High Hill with its own recurring characters and locations, its own stories and mysteries. Something the book didn't tell you to do. Something more than the sum of the parts on the pages. I mentioned in my Wonderhome review how the folks on Ko-fi let me invest in the channel in an ethical and independent way, so I'm not tempted to take deals from publishers and turn my videos into adverts. So a huge thank you for that. It makes a big difference. And I also managed to pay it forward a little, sending my copy of Wonderhome to a good home. So congrats again to Greg for winning it. I've got a busy schedule of reviews coming up with a mixture of the games that viewers voted on, designer-submitted games, and some compilations of little zines you probably haven't heard of, as well as a couple of other projects in the pipeline. So please do subscribe to help get eyes on those little indie games that deserve a lot more attention. And until next time, happy adventures.